Hey everybody, Objectively Dan here, and I want to know if you've ever heard of this guy called John Brandenburg. He has a PhD in theoretical plasma physics from Harvard University. So you think he'd know what he's talking about, but he actually believes that there was a nuclear war on Mars because of some elements that we found here. Now you can't find any peer-reviewed publications of him talking about it, but he sure does have a book to sell you on it. And man, I'm just so tired of all these folks coming in with all these credentials, talking all kinds of stuff. It really undermines people's arguments from authority when you're trying to cite legitimate research, when you got guys like him saying all kinds of nonsense. So tell me what you think. Maybe he does have a point, or maybe he's just kind of wacko like a lot of people we talk about on here. Whatever you think, the show is starting right now. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host, Objectively Dan. This is the live call-in show that happens every single week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time. We talk to people about what they believe and why. And if you'd like to call us, you can certainly do that. Lines are open. It's at 512-991-9242, or you can call it through your computer at tiny.cc/calltw. Truth Wanted is, of course, a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. And every single week, I always have a special guest. This week is no different. It is Allegedly Ian joining me today. Hello, Allegedly Ian. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing great, folks. This is not a bit. We're just two dudes that have an adverb that's kind of related, and then our names. And we just came across this separately. I don't know how or why, but it's just a thing. It's just a thing, right, Ian? We have not talked to each other before today, right? That's true? Okay.
Yeah. There's only so many parts of speech, inevitably. It makes sense, It's just a dice roll.
It's true. What was the inspiration for your name? Because I got to know.
Yeah, so there was one of my TikTok alternate accounts. My display name was possibly Ian, and I like that. I think it's fun, Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But then I put into my Discord server a question last year about what I should change it to, and it was a bunch of adverbs with followed by Ian, allegedly Ian, possibly Ian, necessarily Ian, identically Ian, things like that. And allegedly Ian won the poll.
That's pretty good. Mine, I've told the story before, but it's been a while in case people are curious. I just thought it's just really funny because I think I was hung up on debates about objective morality at the time. And, I just thought people's use of the word objective was just so silly. And so I just wanted a really silly name for myself, which was just Objectively Dan, because how can you be Objectively Dan about something? It doesn't make any sense. I think people misinterpret it. And I kind of regret it a little bit because they think I'm saying I'm objective. And I think that's not it, because I'm using it as an adverb in this sense. I'm describing the Dan. I'm not saying I'm an objective person. I don't know. Anyway, I think it comes off as something else, but it is what it is. Anyway, Allegedly Ian joining me today from the great land of TikTok. As a TikTok person, you're in that hellscape every day. I always call TikTok a hellscape. It's my favorite word to use for it. You agree? So
I agree. It absolutely is. Yeah.
You make content on it, but you're one of those types. There's the grifters and the anti-grifters. I would describe you as an anti-grifter in that category. Yeah. What if you could describe your TikTok? How would you describe it?
Well, I do debate content every single day. I mainly debate the existence of God. And then on occasion, once in a blue moon, I wander into a different subject to debate that. Right now, I'm in the philosophy minds, reading about all sorts of things related to trans validity, because I think I want to start doing those lives as well. Because I think that the arguments are underrepresented, and there's a huge literature base. I think it's too bad that more people aren't super into the literature base for all these topics.
Yeah, a lot of people think that being trans is such a new thing when it's not. It's been written
Yeah.
about, it's been talked about for decades at this point, right? And then like the arguments for the validity of trans people really relates to arguments in feminism in general, right?
Yeah.
And there's a whole, I mean, that's even a bigger pool of stuff to talk about there. So I think that's great that you're talking about that, and brave of you to do that on TikTok of all places. Again, because
Yeah.
I mean, it's just pretty wild. I don't have to tell you. You probably get into some pretty wild conversations on your lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know. I think like the trans stuff especially, there's like an element of it that makes me like really sad because there's been multiple times where I've debated trans issues and I've just been like, gosh, not to be like boastful or whatever, but it's just like a one-sided stomp, right? Like the person's never thought about it before and it shows because they're like contradicting themselves all over the place. And despite the fact that like the anti-trans person is doing so bad, people will still say that they're doing like a great job
Yeah.
every time they like restate the conclusion over and over again.
Yeah, to be fair, that happens with like a million topics on the internet, right? Like creationism, I don't know, like a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff where one side is like very clearly like making the better case, but for some reason there's always got fans. I don't know. That's the thing with debates. We talk about this all the time on this show. It's like to me, the purpose of a good debate is for the person who's really interested in learning the arguments for
Yeah.
both sides, so someone who's really going to be honest in that. It's never for the people who are actually doing the debate. It's always for the people who are
Yeah.
looking for more information. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, well,
Mm.
so okay, I think it's contextual,
Mm.
right? I would agree with what you're saying in every like high profile instance, right? Like if I were to go and debate like Cliff and Stewart, for example, it wouldn't be because I think that I'm gonna like bring Cliff and Stewart towards my position. It would be to like show all their audience like how silly they are. It's I don't think like I think like there's this phenomena called cognitive inertia, and it operates at like a lot of different levels, right? So at the baseline like neuroscience level, when our brain has like made up its mind about something, it literally stops processing input data and like data that goes to the contrary. But then there's like more levels to this, right? Like at the level of identity, if your identity depends on your beliefs in something, then you're going to keep on believing in that thing. There's too much motivation not to. And then when you get to like the highest level, like when you're getting paid to believe that thing, that's when the cognitive inertia is like very, very harsh.
Right.
You're at the point in time when you're literally getting paid to believe this thing. There's no shot you're gonna stop believing this thing. It takes a really like deeply honest person, like a really, really, really reflective, really evaluative person to come away from a belief when they're literally getting paid to believe it.
Yeah, I'm 100% on the same page with you there. I think oftentimes we don't evaluate the psychological barriers that are happening, because you don't want to psychoanalyze strangers on the internet, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't have a basis for it. But at the same time, we're not necessarily truth-seeking machines. That's not what
Yeah.
humans are. Humans are wanting to defend themselves out of an obligation to the self, right? In order to defend the structures that you already have internally, because that's what makes it easier. You're like, somebody tearing down your worldview is going to make your life harder because you have to kind of figure things out. So it's better for you to work with the structures that are given to you than it is for you to kind of rebuild and figure that stuff out. Because I mean, even just one little crack, if you're talking about the trans debate stuff, right? Like, if you figure out that trans people are valid, that's going to change your view about a lot of stuff, probably,
Yeah.
right? If you can be convinced of that, you're probably going to be convinced of a lot of other kinds of political opinions or views on women or things like that. So I think that there is a lot of times what we're up against is not a debate of what's real versus what's not real. In facts, it's purely just people's emotions, people's psychology getting in the way. I don't know. That's my take.
I totally
But
agree with that. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Right. Like we're riddled with cognitive biases.
Mhm.
Humans, we didn't evolve to be perfect reasoners,
Yeah.
especially like all the like famous like Bayesian examples where when it comes to Bayesian reasoning, like humans are just so bad at it, right? We're
Right.
just terrible at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like we don't for an example to the audience, say you had two people, or no, you have. I'm sorry. Gosh, I always butcher the examples. But you have one person. This person is like very into social justice. They studied hard in all of their classes, and they have like a great mind for numbers. What's more likely, that this person is an accountant, or that this person is an accountant and a feminist? Intuitively, a lot of people say, well, it's more likely that this person's an accountant and a feminist.
Yeah.
But that's the wrong conclusion. It's more likely that this person is an accountant, because the set of people who are accountants and feminists are always going to be a subset of the people who are accountants. It's just a smaller set. Like, one automatically entails the other. I don't know. I just think that like humans are riddled with cognitive biases. We're riddled with flaws in our reasoning and our logic. And if we don't take time to think slowly through things, then we're going to end up with a lot of bad conclusions.
Right. That's a great, the example I always heard for that was a librarian or a farmer, I think is what it was. Right.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, if you take two people, or you take a person, and their personality is they're really thoughtful. They like to read books a lot. They like recommending books to other people. And I don't know, they're really into like doing research. Are they more likely to be a librarian or a farmer? When like statistically, there's just more farmers in the world than librarians. So it's just like you can't just take vibes. I mean, maybe that'll update your Bayesian priors like a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
Your prior should be like catastrophically low. Like if it's just a person, if all the information you have is a person, your prior should be catastrophically low, that this person is a librarian, right? And then when you get the information, you update it a little bit, right? It's a little bit higher, but not enough to be more than a farmer.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Again, just taking, and some people say that example is problematic because like where you are in the world matters, and like time and place. Like obviously that's in there too. But you know, the point is like people suck at reasoning in general. It's just hard. It's a hard thing to do. So I appreciate folks who are interested in, you know, going out there and I think fighting for the right thing, and also, you know, teaching people about this kinds of stuff. Because TikTok is, whether you like it or not, a form of learning where people go and get new information about the world. There's a lot of people in older than us who look at places like TikTok and just say, that's a waste of time. This is just for kids, whatever, or this is just for ignorant people, whatever. It's like, yeah, but that's where you want to go though, because that's where people are at. I'm sorry, but you know, most people aren't going to the public library anymore for these kinds of things. They're going online. So you got to go where the people are if you want to make a difference or an impact. So I don't know.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think that does speak, speaking of like no one going to the public library, I think it's like a travesty, but it feels like, I don't know. It feels like not very many people read. Like, and I know, right? Like it's hard. It's hard to find the time. I agree with that, like wholeheartedly. But I don't know. It makes me sad that there's like a lot of people who just decided that they're done learning. You know, they graduated school, no more learning for them. I don't know.
Right.
I just couldn't live that life. Maybe I'm sure they're happy with it. I'm sure they're content. It just could never be me.
Yeah, I feel that too. Another pet peeve. I mean, obviously that what you've said has been said a lot too, and I totally agree with that. One that gets me is just all information exists on the internet, apparently, right? If it's not on the internet, it doesn't exist. That is a real perception some people have, which is really interesting, especially if you're. I mean, I don't do research myself, but if you know anybody who's in a research program, their whole deal is to come up with the new stuff. You know, the stuff that doesn't exist yet, you know, like, there's going to be new things from people who are actively looking into these kinds of subjects. There's another bias at play where it's like, if it doesn't exist in this body of research, it's not a real thing. And it's like, well, then nothing new ever happens at that point. It goes the opposite way too. But anyway.
Exactly. Yeah.
On that note, let's talk about our segment. Ian, every single week, we are asking everybody a question or a prompt. It is our We Want the Truth segment. Last week, we asked our audience, the aliens thought they'd have an easy time on Earth, but they didn't anticipate blank. And Eli is going to come up and share some of those comments. Eli, welcome to the broadcast.
Hey, to you both. This is a bit, everybody. I want to point that out. I felt left out on the adverbs.
For the audio listeners, we have changed Eli's user to be supposedly Eli to match the sort of adverb name. Oh, and 3-letter name too. That's another thing we all have in common. Wow, that's weird.
Yeah. So, but it is a bit. It's not. You pointed it out earlier that it wasn't, and so I felt like it was fair. Anyway,
I mean, you could use it as your handle. You just go by Eli Slack, so I don't know what if you need a bit for it.
Yeah, I mean, I could go for it. But the aliens didn't anticipate the following things. Here's our top 3 answers. Number 3 from Zach reads, the aliens that they didn't have a good time on Earth, but they didn't anticipate the long lines outside the probing stations and just how creative we can get in bed. That one is my favorite. If I was picking, that would have been number 1.
That's so the ultimate sci-fi story for me, if I was ever to write, would just be like aliens coming to Earth and realizing how fucked up humans are. and
These guys are weird.
That's how we win the resistance, where it's like, oh man, they don't know how horny people can be for these aliens. Like, you realize as soon as we contact extraterrestrial life, there's going to be some Rule 34, like same day. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, the deepfakes that would get pumped out.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, and we had like AI video now. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
that would go
100%.
south real fast. The number 2 answer was from Anastasia, I think. Anastasia. Aliens having a hard time. The crop circles didn't quite line up with their landing gear. It just we didn't plan it right.
Didn't count for that. Yeah. That sucks. That's not good.
Right. And their alternative landing sites is actually part of the number 1 from Doc Bach, probably. The aliens thought they'd have an easy time on Earth until they found out we wanted more pyramids. And they're like, you guys got like over 500 of them. What else do you want?
Did we not give you guys enough pyramids? I don't know. That's really funny. Oh man. Yeah. Well, that's pretty good. Thank you, Eli. Thank you for reading the answers. And what is our prompt this week?
So for this week, put your answers in the comments, not in the chat. The question is going to be, what conspiracy theories do you think could arise in the future?
In the future. Future. Yeah, I don't know. Everything's going to be AI, deepfake, right? That's going to be the accusation, I think. Yeah,
I think it'll be that like all of the historical records from 2025 was all just deep fake AI.
Yes.
And they're going to be like, none of that could have possibly really happened.
Oh my God. It's going to be like, oh man, how could, I don't know. It's like some TV show. Like, how could this show actually exist in this time? Well, the truth is it didn't exist. This is a deep fake, like that'll be something. It's like that one guy. Oh, what's his name? The guy that's like, that believes that like the period between, what is it, like 300 to 800 BC, like didn't actually happen.
Yeah, there's like 300 years that we added to the calendar. I don't know the name either, but I know
it's like a Russian guy. I don't know.
Yeah,
that's a whole thing. Anyway, so leave your comment. Before. You never heard that before?
No, I have heard of that before. But I've only heard that for like one set of like 100 years. There's like, well, that didn't happen. It's like, well, that just doesn't seem very plausible, right? Like, who are all the people getting born here? We have lots of, we certainly have like lots of historical figures from this time. What do you like? What do you say when the carbon dating of these things comes back and says, yeah, it's from here?
I don't know what these people think, but anyway, that's the prompt. What conspiracy theories could arise in the future? Leave your comment below, and we will get to them next week. Thank you, Eli.
No problem. Have a fun show, guys.
All right. And getting back to it, talking to allegedly Ian here. And folks, we are a call-in show. We will be getting to calls in a sec, but we have a lot of open lines right now. So come on in and ask Ian a question. So you like to talk about debates on trans validity. Is that your favorite topic that you talk about?
No, the topic I talk about more than anything is the God debate.
Yeah.
Although I
Okay.
will say, like, after you like do really well in a trans debate, or especially after you change someone's mind in a trans debate, it feels like really good. It feels
Mm.
like way better than any God debate I've ever won. Like when someone says, you know what, that makes sense, I will start using someone's pronouns. I don't know. I guess like, you know, religion is certainly important, but like the magnitude of that makes me smile.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've thought about this where it's like there's been this they talk about bread tube, right, on YouTube. They talk about these sort of progressive movements that happen online. And like atheists by and large have also adopted this, but they're still kind of like they're not fully integrated in a lot of these spaces. You know what I mean? Like the God debate is just kind of an optional, it's a side quest for a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah,
folks.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I understand why, right? It's not actually related on its own to a lot of these issues. I mean, they kind of is,
Yeah.
but it kind of isn't. But also
Yeah.
like it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with people's actions. Like making sure a person is treated respectfully and can integrate well into society as like a trans person, that's like I want that to happen more than convincing somebody that a god isn't real. Right? Like
Yeah.
if I could choose to change someone's mind on, I would change the first one every time, right? Because that's like just
Yeah.
that's just has a larger social, like, not that the other one wouldn't have an impact,
Of
but
course. Yeah.
in a social world, you know what I mean? Like that, I feel like that's going to be more impactful in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Like in theory, like we've all met like religious people whose religion is like the basis of them being like a genuinely like great person.
Right.
But you know, every now and then, like, or not, it's not every now and then, it's actually quite frequently where people will cite their religion as like the reason why they're a bigot. And I don't know, like I think that there's a lot of virtue to be able to like immediately bust out like some sick problem of evil on these people and
Yeah.
then just like collapse their entire worldview in front of them, right? Like I just think
Yeah.
there's a lot of value to that.
Well, it cuts both ways. If we're going to be able to say, hey, atheists can live their life and be good people, and you don't need God for it, then
Yeah.
the same should be true. Like it almost means that you don't have to talk about the God thing in order to change people's minds about how to be a good person, right?
Yeah.
Like it kind of works in that way. But not to say, again, incredibly important for my life and my journey, for someone who was a Christian and was definitely like having a career path towards Christianity. Didn't want to keep doing that if I was going to lose that. But at the same time, I don't know. It's a hard thing to talk about in
Yeah.
regards to other issues. You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
So, but you enjoy talking about it, of course.
I do, yeah. I talk about the God topic. It's fascinating. I love it. It's like a puzzle. You know, God has all these properties, and then you get to derive contradictions from them. I think it's so much fun.
So that's your method. You kind of ask folks, okay, what kind of God do you believe in, and then you kind of break it down from there.
Yeah, yeah. I think that there's there's like the minimal conception of God, which is just like a mind that created the universe. And I think that there are problems with that. Even like I think there are contradictions that you can derive just from that. But the contradictions get like more persuasive, like the more properties you add. You know, I'm a problem of evil enthusiast, you know, when I hear that someone believes in a God who's all good, all powerful, and all knowing, I jump on that. But yeah, I think I think the argument is fascinating. I think that
Tell me about that, because I used to think that the problem of evil wasn't that great of an argument, but I've actually been more convinced in the last couple of years that it actually is a better argument, and you find it to be a pretty compelling one.
I think it's like so there's like some niche arguments that I think are like pretty airtight, but they're just like very technical and very like they're almost like gotcha-esque. But in terms of like actually changing people's minds, I think problem of evil, it's like a pretty airtight argument if you're running it correctly. And it has a lot of force to it, because your options are either God doesn't exist or like somehow these like horrible atrocities are good. And you don't want to say that, you don't want to think that the horrible atrocities are good. So it forces you cognitively to settle on, I guess God isn't real. Especially so when the example of the problem of evil comes directly from scripture itself, the genocides that God himself commands, these are like irreconcilable, right? There's just no way to make sense of this. He's just obviously doing something profoundly evil.
Yeah. Or it's, it comes from a group of people that are justifying their own eccentricities, just like every culture on earth does, right?
Yeah,
In their
exactly.
own national identity and story, right?
Yeah.
I like, to me, it was anthropology that kind of got me through that. Understanding, okay, well, this exists in the Bible. I was taught as a Christian it's because, God has a plan for everyone. But actually, this is like a narrative that the Jewish people told themselves to differentiate themselves from other people groups at the time, right? Like I don't know. To me, I just find more explanation in that, and I agree with you. It's like if I was a Christian again, or let's say for some reason I was convinced that a God was real, I'd have to really have a hard time. I'd have to have a sit down and figure out, okay, what about like every other page in some of the Old Testament is just like killing. Oh, then they kill these people. They kill these people. It's like, okay, well, what are we doing with that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was like what was so striking to me when I first read through the Bible. I was like, wow, this is like really hard to believe. We have like Genesis 16, I think, where God is like, God is coming down to like a runaway slave and telling her, hey, you should go back to being a slave for your slave master. And it's like, wow, like, damn, God, why would you even do that?
Never. He's never been an abolitionist, that God.
Yeah.
Never been his, or pro-democracy. I always talk about that too. Never been into that. But were you ever a Christian?
Yeah, I was born and raised Christian. Logical argumentation brought me away from it. I think I was like 13 or 14. My friend ran the rock on me. He asked me if God can make a rock that's so heavy you can't lift it. And then I was like, oh, I guess God doesn't exist, huh?
Wow, really? So that was it for you?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. That's
and I don't think the argument goes through, like, against like high level, like Christians who have thought about it. I don't think the argument goes through. But for me at that moment, it did. And now I have like much better reasons to not believe.
That's interesting. Actually, wait, tell me about why that doesn't go through for you. What made you realize it's not as good?
I think that there's perfectly valid moves that the Christian is capable of making. I think that they can say, when we say God's all powerful, what we mean by that is that he can do everything that's logically possible. Right, God, by his very nature, can't contradict himself. He's not going to. There's no possible world where God contradicts himself. That's what being all powerful means to us. So then you can just reject the rock question on those grounds. But I find a lot of utility. I still run the rock on people from time to time when they say God exists outside of logic. Because when you take, if you put God in logic and allow him to be logically scrutinized, then you can say, well, the rock question just doesn't apply to God. But when you take him out of logic, when you say, oh, that contradiction, it's nothing, God doesn't need to be logical. He has his own logic. That's when the rock comes back. If God's outside of logic, if a contradiction isn't a problem for God, then God needs to be able to make a rock that's so heavy he can't lift it, and then he needs to be able to lift that rock. God can lift the rock that he can't lift if he's outside of logic.
Yeah, that the whole, and I've heard this before too, right? This whole, I can't do things outside of logic, which to me that's really sketchy in itself in a way, because it's like, okay, we're talking about an invisible, all-powerful like where was the logic to begin with?
True.
Right? How did we logically get there in the first place? I don't know. But for some reason, now he has to be in the realm of logic, even though his very existence makes me question logic itself. I don't know. But neither here nor there. It's interesting how different arguments work differently for different people. The one that I got hung up on was the morality thing. Not that I think was the first thing that convinced me that God wasn't real, but it was the one that gave me the most pause. It was like, I don't understand how to be a good person. How can everybody in the world talk about being good or not if they don't have any reasons to think? Because as a Christian, you're told you have like objective right and wrong. Let's talk about this because that's how my name, Objectively Dan. Like I think it's the same thing with when Christians say objectively good. What does that actually mean? It seems to be whatever God wants, And
Yeah.
and God seems to be especially capricious. I don't know. He doesn't seem like it's very consistent. And I realize even if there is an objective morality, I'm not even sure that God or Christians fit that criteria, because they seem to be doing some bad stuff, right? I asked this with Frank Turek one time, because there's a verse in the Bible where they stone a guy for picking up sticks on a Sunday. And I asked him, was this an example of objective morality, them punishing this guy? And he went on this explanation about, well, for the time, this was them, the punishment for breaking the law. And I was like, yeah, but was that objectively the right thing to punish him for that? To like kill a guy for picking up sticks on a Sunday? And I couldn't get a straight answer, because it's like, okay, if it's objective, then that means that was wrong. Yeah. And they did it wrong. Like, it never made sense, but I don't know.
Yeah, right. Like, there's so much to say about Christians and their claim that they have objective morality. Yeah. Their objective morality comes from, notably a mind, God, that's a subject. Like, I don't know how to explain to you. That's a subject, if God is not an object, he's a subject. So the morality is going to be equally subjective if it's literally just what God wants. And if it's just like whatever's in his nature, then that's arbitrary. If God happened to be like a lying, cheating scoundrel, then that would make being a lying, cheating scoundrel good. It's arbitrary.
Yeah, definitely arbitrary. And to me, and this isn't necessary for something to be objective, but it seems like it would be in God's best interest for morality to be somewhat clear, right? When I think of objectivity, I certainly think of clearness, right? Something that people can get to independently, right? That's kind of the whole point. So like, it doesn't seem like that's really working out. It doesn't seem like we got there, and we're still struggling with that. But
what if God put into our biology like some like flashing like yellow lights every time you were about to do something immoral, and then there's I feel like the claim that morality is objective is like way clearer, right? Every time you're going to do something wrong, you know exactly when it's going to be wrong.
God invented engineering. He should know that this is something he could have figured out in the design process. I don't know. There's ways to do that, because people struggle with their inhibitions, like biologically. There are some people who have stronger inhibitions than others, and it's like, well, that should give you pause. How does that work? I don't know. Anyway,
exactly right. Like there are some crimes that I can't do. Right. Mm-hmm. No matter how hard I will, I wouldn't be able to do like some like grisly string of murders. Like, I don't have the heart for it. Like I couldn't do it. I couldn't possibly do it. I can't will myself to do an action like that. But some people obviously can. Right. So it seems like there's just like this unequal distribution of like, it certainly seems like there's some evils that I can't will myself to do. Likewise, like if you were born like severely disabled, you can't do like a crime that's going to require you to do one of the things that you don't have the ability to do. Right. Like you don't have that ability.
Right. I don't know if I ever talked about this on air. The last one of the last conversations, when I was leaving my Christian church community, I was talking to a guy, and I can't remember how we got to this subject, but I think we were talking about right and wrong, and he brought up this argument. It's like, well, we all have to have personal responsibility for our own things. And he's like, I'm a kleptomaniac. I steal stuff just like unconsciously, but like, that's my personal responsibility, right? I have to deal with that. And I'm like, actually, I think you bringing that up is an interesting thing, because it's like, I don't struggle with that. So it's like, why is that fair for you? Why do you have to have a higher, like, why do you have to be accountable to the same level that I'm accountable for that? Like, obviously you got to do what you got to do at the end of the day. Right. But like, at the same time, I don't think it's fair to judge you the same way it would be to judge me for taking something.
Of course. Yeah, so, absolutely.
Like that's the humanist kind of response. Right. But like from a Christian perspective, it's like, no, every sin is the same in God's eyes in some way. So I don't know.
That's my favorite line. Yeah. That's like the least defensible thing I think I've ever heard in my entire life. Yeah. I don't even know how you would begin to defend that. Right. Yeah. Like you're really telling me that saying a single lie is as bad as the Holocaust. I just don't think so. Right. Like that just doesn't seem plausible.
Right. Yeah. That's something that I don't know how I like internalized as a Christian when I look back. It's like, yeah, of course these aren't the same. I wouldn't want them to be viewed the same, like that would be a way worse world to live in if they were the same. But on that note, we do have folks that want to talk to us, Ian, and this is a call-in show. You want to talk to some people?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, great. Let's do that. Before we do, I have to give a shout out to the folks who donate on the Patreon. Every single week, I'm always giving a shout out to the patron of the week. If you'd like to donate and become a patron of the week, you can do that at tiny.cc/Patreon TW. I, of course, want to thank everybody that donates, but this week's patron of the week is going to be, wait for it, Scott Page. Thank you so much, Scott Page. And thank you to everybody that donates on the Patreon. You guys rock. And of course, as always, we have super chats on if you'd like to donate and do that. And as long as it's YouTube appropriate, we will read them live on the air. That being said, let's jump into our first call. We have John from California who wants to talk to us. John, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Going good, John. How can we help you?
So, I consider myself a biblical literalist. In order to do that, though, before I even went into that, basically the thing that formed my beliefs is I had seen a lot of people talk about the Bible. I'd always, heard people talk about the Bible, but without having read it myself, without actually knowing what it was about, I really didn't feel that qualified to talk about it. So the first thing I wanted to do was go through, try to figure out what it meant. And then because it's not in English, obviously, also, I'm not literate in Greek, obviously, but I'm limited a little bit, but try to find enough about the source language to just be able to see, because people do like to play word games in translation. It took me all of about 10 minutes to figure out that nobody knows what the Lord's Prayer means, which to me has actually just kind of been one of the most significant things. As somebody who goes to church, as somebody who takes religion seriously, how can we do that, though, if we don't know what the Lord's Prayer means? Like that's it.
Well, tell me about that. What's your specific criticism with the common interpretation of the Lord's Prayer?
The phrase that gets translated as daily bread is actually a Greek word that nobody has ever used in any other context, that we don't have an actual hard, we can't translate directly. It was a compound created by Jesus that we've mistranslated in English, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think that kind of almost bolsters what Ian and I were just talking about before, which is kind of the lack of clarity that comes with Christianity sometimes. It's interesting because you start off being very critical of your other people's interpretation of Christianity, which I'm probably in agreement with you on. But like you still call yourself a biblical literalist. So tell me about that.
Well, this is the part that, like, the reason I'm calling this show specifically too, and I've called the Atheist Experience a couple of times, and I don't think they've taken me seriously, but this is the part that I think sets me apart from other callers. You talked about a lack of clarity and, like, what does God even mean? In the beginning, this was silly, but now, like, years later, I have full-on converted to this as my religion. You guys know, you remember the flying spaghetti monster joke?
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
That was, that's a pretty classic Atheist Experience thing. When people come on a God, you talk about God, you might bring up like a flying spaghetti monster.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And not just Atheist Experience, but atheist culture in general kind of talks about it. This
is based on.
Go ahead, John.
Sorry, I cut you off. But this is not based on this one thing. We were talking about getting clarity, and this is what I'm talking about. I consider myself a biblical literalist. I went through and just as a joke, just pictured like, hey, what would happen if I take every reference to Jesus Christ and replace it with the flying spaghetti monster? Not only was it a joke, like I genuinely have converted to this faith. I believe that this is the literal interpretation of the Bible. This is the one true religion. And once I did this, literally everything makes sense now. You don't even understand. You don't like this changed my entire life.
What didn't make sense before that makes sense now? I'm sorry, but I hate to interrupt you, but what makes sense, what would you say makes sense now that didn't make sense before? Like what sort of like phenomena is explained under your new worldview?
genuinely everything. And how once I interpreted the Bible this way, I found out, it lines up pretty much exactly to what they taught me about evolutionary history in school. And it explains science. It explains everything that I feel like I know in my heart about religion. It really just explains everything.
Okay, well, that's okay. So there's a lot of stuff happening here. This is very interesting. There's a lot to unpack. I'm just going to pick from the hat here because you mentioned evolutionary history. That's very interesting that you say you're a biblical literalist, but you say that the Bible lines up with what evolution was taught to you in school. Explain to me that one, because that's pretty novel to me.
I mean, even just even beyond evolution itself, all of the geologic history that's been taught to me. If
let's
you go
stick
back
with evolution.
and read the Bible, and you assume that God, when it says God, it's talking about food. It's crazy, but it lines up with a lot of stuff. And I don't know. We learned enough about like geology in school to maybe I'm stretching it, but there's a lot of stuff that does kind of line up with the flood narrative. There's some stuff that does. Genesis does kind of. If you take a step back and look at it, but you also stay literal about it, it does line up pretty amazingly with a lot of the stuff that, I don't know, at least at school.
I think folks like Ken Ham have made an entire career out of saying it doesn't, though. That's really weird to me that you say that it does, because help me figure that out. I really am so curious.
Do we trust Ken Ham as an authority about it?
No, I don't trust Ken Ham as well. But my point is,
I believe, and this is something.
But John, listen. My point is, a lot of Christians. There's a reason why.
Banana thing is generally outright blasphemy.
John, we're talking over each other real quick.
Bananas.
I know he's bananas. I know we're on the same page there. But this is my point. There are millions of Christians that agree with Ken Ham, right? Because they look at the Bible and they say, yeah, Earth 6 days, okay, makes sense. Or the universe 6 days, whatever, right? And then 7 days, I guess. There was a rest day, whatever. It was 6. And then, they say, okay, there's about 6,000 years or so between then and now. And that's the traditional literalist interpretation. But you're saying everything that's been taught in school, which is not 6,000 years, we're talking about millions of years in geological events and evolutionary events, right? Are happening. I'm very confused how you reconcile that. I want to narrow in. Can you give me a specific example here? Because if I was to read the Bible right now, I would not get evolution from it.
Yeah. That seems to be the exact opposite of what it's saying, right? It seems like God says abracadabra, and then the world appears, and then he says alakazam, and then all the different species appear, not evolutionarily,
right,
but just via an act of magic.
Right.
This is where it takes understanding my faith a little bit more to see. You got to see the premise that this follows from. So I feel like I might be jumping in a little too soon here. But going back to the very first form of life, which was clearly blue-green algae, basically my definition of Christ is photosynthesis. I'm getting lost myself here. I'm going back to the very beginning of time, believing that Jesus, the same one that came to us as Jesus as a man, is basically the same cell, the same photosynthetic stem cell that's just been bouncing around, forever. That explains Jesus' miracles, by the way, too, that it's a photosynthetic stem cell. That's how it
I don't think, John, I again, don't mean to interrupt, but I don't think the consensus is in the scientific community that the first life was photosynthetic stem cells.
Yeah.
Or algae.
It wasn't stem cells. It was blue-green algae. Fair enough. But
I don't even think it's algae. It's we're talking about tiny protein, molecules basically.
In the beginning was God, and the photosynthetic cell was with God, and the photosynthetic cell was God.
Yeah. Go ahead, John.
I don't know. We're getting a little sidetracked here. I think that I don't want this to turn into a weird call, but
I agree. I think we are getting a little sidetracked, but you're coming to me with a pretty novel claim here, John. I'm going to be honest. It's not every week that I hear somebody say I'm a biblical literalist and also evolution is real and a whole bunch of other stuff. I mean, this is pretty novel to me. I'm trying to understand your worldview, but I am having a little bit of a hard time. So maybe we take a step back. Let's take a step back. You were convinced you weren't a Christian, and now you are a Christian. Walk me through that process. What premises were you convinced of that changed your mind on that?
To be entirely honest, walking you through my entire journey to faith would probably take too much time. And
I don't need your whole life story. I don't need your whole life story. All I want is just a few basic things that you learned, and maybe we can go from there.
I was gonna, before you would ask for a specific example, and I kind of copped out of that, I was gonna give you one of those, or do you want me to answer this question too? You've asked.
Let's go with this one because like the evolution thing, that's part of a greater whole, right? Which is your belief in Christianity, and I'm very curious about how you arrived to that. What started to change your mind? And again, I don't need your life story. You don't have to tell me every part of that, but you obviously learned some new information, and I want to know what that information is.
Basically, and that's why I brought up the Lord's Prayer at first. My interpretation of Christianity hinges upon the idea that instead of bringing up daily bread, just for no reason reminding us that we need to eat as if we needed to do that, Jesus was actually trying to say something way more profound, and it was the early Christians, and it's the Christians now. It was the church the entire time that's been spurring it up. My version of the Lord's Prayer includes the phrase free bread, but given by the churches, not by the government, not by taxes, by churches, and just by good, honorable Christian people who give out free bread because they know it comes from photosynthesis, our Savior.
All right, John, I don't know.
We have been missing the point entirely by thinking that Jesus is anything other than what gives us sustenance every day, which is photosynthesis.
So you became a Christian because you reinterpreted this one Bible verse as meaning something different from what other Christians think?
A lot of Bible verses.
Okay.
Wait, why draw the line there?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Wait, why are we drawing the line there? Why not go back one step further and say that the Son is Jesus?
This is where
you're saying like the Son transmits its beams. The Sun transmits its beams into the photosynthetic cell, and the photosynthetic cell is Jesus. Why not? Why draw the line there? Why not go back the step further and say that the Son is Jesus?
You kind of can. And that's what it said in the Bible, John 1:1. Christ is the Word embodied. The Word, logos, the laws of physics, that's my entire understanding that the laws of physics are our Savior really is what turned my beliefs around. But you talked about, you said bring up another Bible verse, and this is the one that I think really distinguishes me. This is what sets me apart. When I say literalist, I mean literalist. The Last Supper, Jesus said to the disciples, bread is my body, wine is my blood. I said literal. Don't hear what you want to hear. Hear what Jesus said.
Yeah, I don't know, John. I'm not sure where to take this conversation because I'm very interested in knowing this, like how you came to this, and I'm getting reinterpretations of the Bible, right? And I
was working in a movie theater.
Okay.
Maybe a question that I can ask. You said you believe in the flood. If the flood happened, how did the kangaroos get to Australia?
Yeah, let's go with that.
That was the example I was going to bring up too. And can I go with a more specific example myself? We get to the kangaroos, but
sure. As long as it's like in the same vein as like something that shouldn't be there and is now there. If a global flood happened.
I believe that the story of the Native Americans and the Native American genocide, it really does line up a lot with Genesis and the idea of Exodus, and then going through the whole Bible where we just kind of accept that Christopher Columbus and the Catholic Church are literally the Antichrist. It kind of makes a lot of sense. I don't know.
John, I feel like this is a troll call at this point. I don't even think you're being serious with me.
Why? No, that's actually my beliefs. Is you go back with the whole, the Bering Sea receding, coming across the thing, getting cut off. The sea comes back up, and that's why Genghis Khan didn't come over here. Columbus showed up.
Maybe just the kangaroos. How did the kangaroos get to Australia?
Yeah, let's go to that.
I, off the top of my head, don't know much about the evolution of kangaroos. Did they evolve there? Did they evolve in Australia? Did they come?
Wouldn't they have all died in the flood? Wouldn't they have all gotten like obliterated by the flood? And then the Ark lands where, like Mount Ararat lands in the Middle East. How did the kangaroos get from the Middle East to Australia?
The Bible did not claim there was an extinction during the flood.
Yeah, it absolutely does. It says like super explicitly, like every single thing that lives and breathes on the that the water is like 15 cubits above the tallest mountain. Yeah, it says that it like quashed like everything that breathes.
That's
like,
kind of the whole point. That's why they brought the animals, because there wasn't going to be any left.
Species was saved. It didn't cause any species to go extinct. That's from the Bible.
But how did the kangaroos get from the Middle East to Australia?
It is what it said in the Bible.
But how did the kangaroos get from the Middle East to Australia?
Wouldn't the kangaroos be killed in the flood?
Fossil evidence of like proto kangaroos in the Middle East? I'm not familiar with this myself. I'll tell you that.
As far as I'm aware, no.
No.
I don't think that. I assume they evolved in Australia. I don't know.
Yeah. So they all would have been killed.
Take, though. That's just off the top. I could Google it. I do a little research first. I assume they probably evolved there. I don't know.
Yeah. But if a flood happened like 6,000 years ago, they would all be super dead. Well, like we would see the kangaroos. We'd see kangaroos in like the Middle East, maybe. We wouldn't see kangaroos in Australia.
I don't think. Those are people who claim to be Christian literalists, claim to be Christians, claim to be followers of Christ, and I don't necessarily agree with their interpretation.
Wait, but you just said there was a global flood event, right? Like you do agree with that?
There have been several. There have been several things that I could point to, and it's almost like a cyclical thing. If you look at Genesis, not only has it happened, it's happened a few times. You kind of understand the patterns.
Okay, but so there's been multiple global flood events.
Yes.
Right, but you don't believe that all life? You believe that somehow life survived in a global flood, because you don't believe they all were extinct.
Yes.
How does that work exactly?
Clearly, we're still here. In the Bible, it said something about Noah building an ark, getting everybody out of there. I believe that's one. It may have happened literally, and I kind of do believe that, but it's also an allegory to a lot of natural phenomenon.
I'm an allegorical literalist.
Yeah,
many, many, many evolutionary bottlenecks we've been through as one family of life. Put it that way.
It's John. I'm gonna be real with you. That doesn't sound like you're a literalist if you're saying this might be an allegory. That is literally the exact opposite of what a literalist believes. Like traditionally, do you know that?
I got to put a disclaimer here. I believe that the Quran is the only authentic, genuine word of God. I do believe there are problems with the other scriptures, but it comes down to how the human authors of those scriptures.
There's no way this has to be a troll. There's no way.
This is very very weird, John. I gotta say, I don't know that you're being serious with me. If you are, maybe we can have a conversation at a different time. But
I believe. What the heck's going on?
I don't know about that, John. I don't know. I'm gonna go ahead and let you go for now, though, because we do have to get to some other callers. Listen, I really want to challenge you to look up what, in case you're serious, because I don't know, but really look up what biblical literalists mean when they say that they're biblical literalists, and see if that word still applies to you. Because I have a feeling when you really look at what it is or what other people use it, you wouldn't use that word for yourself. If you have a different word for yourself, that's fine. But you are not a literalist, my friend, at least not in the traditional sense. I will say that much. But thank you for your time, John. We'll try to, have a conversation later, maybe. I'm not, I will say, if that's a troll, that is a very good troll. Usually you can tell trolls pretty fast. There was so many weird oddities there that made it hard to tell. I was entertained either way, but
Me too.
I don't know, Ian, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, okay. I've talked to a lot of people who hold not similar beliefs, right? But similar kinds of belief, where it's a bit scattered.
Yeah.
But I didn't start thinking it was a troll until I don't know. It's like going from like being a biblical literalist to being like an allegorical biblical literalist to being like an allegorical biblical literalist who thinks that the Quran is true. I think that's when I pull the ripcord personally on thinking that it's like serious.
What was weird is, I made a joke about Ken Ham, and he had no problem immediately saying, "Oh yeah, Ken Ham's crazy," right? There's some like he's okay to be critical about his thoughts about the Bible a little bit, and so I don't know. Here's the great thing about America is that you can believe whatever the goddamn hell you want, and like there's probably at least 12 other people that think the same way you do, or at least along the same lines. Like it is awesome and terrifying at the same time. It's one of the things that I both admire and fear about this country, is that anybody is capable of believing anything, for better or worse. So
absolutely
makes for some great entertainment. I don't know if it's real though. That I gotta say, in the years I've been doing this, I've never heard somebody say they're a biblical literalist, but also that part's an allegory. And this is, I don't know, man. That's
actually it's all fake, right? The real book is the Quran.
The real book is the Quran. Also, Christopher Columbus is somehow involved. I almost want to ask about that. Anyway, that was pretty bizarre.
It was bizarre. I agree.
Hey, welcome to Truth Wanted, Ian. This is what we do apparently. But hey, before we move on to our next caller, real quick announcements I need to make. First of all, if you're in the Austin area, you should check us out on Meetup. It's at tiny.cc/ACA Meetup if you want to see all of our events that are happening with the atheist community of Austin. We've got Philosophy Under the Stars and game nights and a whole lot more. So check that out. And also, we have weekly watch parties at the Free Thought Library. It is a real library. It is a building in Austin that you can go to. Every Sunday, we have live viewings of Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience. The doors open at 11, and it is free to attend. So come on in if you want to meet other folks in the area who also enjoy watching those shows. And again, just pointing out there, we do have Super Chats available as well if folks want to donate that. And last but not least, I have to thank the amazing, awesome, stupendous, wonderful crew that help put together the show every single week. There's our crew cam. Rocking the Truth Wanted merch today. I love it. You can get that in a link in the description as well if you want to get your own Truth Wanted merch. So anyway, thanks crew, and thanks to everybody watching the show. I hope you're enjoying it so far. It's been weird so far, but you know what? That's nothing new around here, I'd say. We got a couple of other folks who want to talk to us. This is interesting. We've got Tweep calling us from Canada. Wants to know, does objectively good/bad mean 100% good/bad? Tweep, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Going good. So is that a fair assessment of your take here? You want to know what objectively means when we're using that word?
Yeah, pretty much. Like it basically is, if you say like objectively good, or somebody says objectively good, does that mean like 100% good? There's absolutely no downsides whatsoever about it, that kind of thing? Or is there something else that I'm probably missing?
Probably not. Typically, the way the word objectively is used in reference to good is just like there's like some fact of the matter that isn't like contextualized to your mind, right? Like it's true even if no mind in the universe thought that it was the case. And there would be like objective. So if moral realism is true, if morality is objective, there would still be like moral dilemmas where either way there's going to be some bad things that happen, but it could still be the case, right? Like in the trolley problem, if objectively there is moral facts, or there are objective moral facts, then there would objectively be like a right or wrong answer to the trolley problem, but it would also recognize that like either way somebody's going to die and that these deaths are bad. At least like any moral realism that I would accept would hold it that like gratuitous deaths are bad, but it doesn't mean that it's like 100% good, that like no possible thing that could be considered bad stems from like the right decision, but just that there is like an objective fact about what is and isn't the right decision.
Right. It doesn't necessarily mean either that it's value monist either, right, versus value plural. So there could be more than one value that could be equal in worth, right? And that could still be true under moral objective morality as well. So I think that's all another confusion, because a lot of people think, oh, there has to be, it's more about is there an answer to the question, what should be done here? And less about like, does it feel good? Or, does it vibe with folks? Or could there be other solutions? Like it is a kind of a more direct answer there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's basically meaning like the best option for like if more or less everybody kind of thing, or everything around it. Does that make sense?
One way to let people kind of put it is, if we're playing a game of chess, there are commonly accepted rules of playing chess. Now you can play chess under different sets of rules, right? But if you're playing under FIDE, which is not how you say that, but the Federation for International Standards of Chess or whatever, there's going to be ways in which you are objectively breaking those rules. It doesn't necessarily mean that knowing those rules doesn't tell you what the best move is necessarily in a situation either. Like it just says that, hey, there's rules out there, and that they can be followed in order to get an answer as to whether something's correct or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think I got what you mean.
Yeah. And to be clear, I don't believe in objective morality in that sense. But it's not necessarily, it's not a requirement for the atheist position either.
Yeah.
There are lots of atheists that differ on that. So,
yeah, I think there's really good arguments for objective morals, and I think there's really good arguments for subjective morals, and a position that I haven't read up on enough. But a lot of my like really intelligent friends who are really good at finding like true things about philosophy, a lot of them really like error theory, which is like the idea that like moral statements are propositional. It's just that all of them are false because moral properties don't exist. So like the moral statement like fails to refer to anything, and so it's false. I don't know. At first I thought it was like kind of a silly moral position, but I don't know. I have higher credence in it now that I have like some really smart friends who believe in it.
Yeah, like I don't think there's anything that is 100% good or 100% bad, like, because there's always going to be some good that comes from almost any action, no matter how bad it is, even if it's based on one person's opinion. Therefore, it can't be like 100% bad. So I think that's more where I was getting almost confused a little bit between like just being 100% good and objectively good.
Yeah,
it's more like
it's confusing
scenario kind of thing for everybody.
Yeah. It gets even more confusing when I feel like there's like this horrible trend, theists like want to tell you that you can only have subjective morality under atheism, and that means that there's no morality. Like subjective morality is no morality, and I feel like it's right. Just like this like raw like dilution of the term. Like the idea that moral subjectivism is moral nihilism is like very silly, and I feel like it's created like lots of confusion about what the moral language even means.
Yeah, this is what confused me. I was just talking about this early in the show. That was like a real hang up for me, because Christian apologists and Christian theology, the modern theology, has always kind of taught me this idea. Well, if you're not a Christian, you're basically a moral nihilist. You can't have any value judgments at all, which is obviously silly, because everybody has value judgments. Whether or not they're the correct value judgments, that's a whole other thing, right? But obviously people have value judgments, and people make decisions, and by and large can make decisions that I at least agree with, and not be Christian. So morality is really complicated, but it gets very much obfuscated in Christian circles for sure.
Well, yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. Anything else, Tweep?
That's it, man. Thanks very much. Have a good one, eh?
Great.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I liked it. Short, sweet, to the point. It's like half the amount of time as the other call. And you know what? Great questions. Because I'm always thinking about this kind of stuff. Like I don't have I've talked about my own, like you talk about moral error theory. Like I kind of lean towards that, but at the end of the day, I'm not even sure if I can put myself at any one particular place or position. I don't know. Yeah. It's really hard.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have
literature? It's just super deep. Like I don't know. Like I've I run arguments for objective morality pretty frequently. I think that they're good. I think that the arguments are good. But at the same time, I think the literature is just way too deep for me to have like a really informed opinion on it. So I don't know. I run an argument called like discourse ethics, which just argues that there's like certain moral presuppositions about. So when you and I decide to settle our disagreements by, instead of like bashing each other's head in with a rock, we like engage in discourse. There's certain norms, certain rules that we presuppose for discourse, and that you can transcendentally ground moral statements just in like what would be necessary to make a moral statement in the first place, like what is necessary for moral discourse. So an argument that I like to run is that if you're engaging in moral discourse, rational moral discourse, then you're attempting to see it from other people's perspective, right? Like you're listening to their counter arguments, their objections. You're not just like putting it into the ether and then like ignoring the other side of the argument, or at least if you did that, you wouldn't be rational. So insofar as you're doing that, then that's just empathy, right? If you're attempting to see it from other people's perspective, that's empathy. So empathy is a necessary prerequisite for moral discourse in the first place. So I like to run that as like as transcendental morals, that empathy is like the transcendental moral standard. But of course, I think the literature is way too deep. So ultimately I am agnostic.
No, yeah, I'm probably in the same boat. Like, because I used to kind of work with a similar thing. I don't know. We'll get too much into the weeds actually if we keep talking about this. I don't know if this is interesting to anybody else besides two of us. Point is, it's complicated and there's a lot of things you can go in there. But don't be one of those atheists either, folks at home. That's like, well, I value pleasure and I don't like pain, and that's what makes it objective. Because it's like there's no reason to necessarily make that objective. Okay, that's just the thing people like. I see that happen all the time too, where it's like, no, that's not how that works. Let's not do that.
It's just more confusion about the moral language. I think it's terrible that there's so much confusion about what moral words mean.
Yeah. If only we taught it more in schools. I don't know.
I agree. Philosophy should absolutely be mandatory. At
least ethics. At least that's my take. Anyway, let's talk to some more callers. We have some folks that want to talk to us. We got Austin calling, didn't give a state, just calling from the US of A. Austin, what do you got for us? You're live on Truth Wanted.
This is more targeted towards Ian, because I saw in his stream earlier today, I saw a lot of people that were Christian or religious that are questioning him about how the earth was created. Because like, there's the 7 days and then there's the scientific reasoning.
Are you asking when you is there like a question or?
It's opinion. I just want your opinion on how you think Earth was created.
When you say the Earth, do you mean the universe or do you mean the Earth?
Earth, yes.
Okay, sure. If I'm not mistaken, the leading scientific theory is that there was like a solar nebula, and that through cooling, there were particles that came together in bigger and bigger masses until the Earth was like fully formed.
Yeah, because I was watching a video about the stages of Earth. Apparently, it was took 4.5 billion years or so for Earth to be formed how it is today.
Or, well, I don't think it took 4.5 billion years for it to vaguely resemble the Earth that we have today, but it took time. At first, I'm pretty sure it was a fireball. It was like a big molten mass. So it cooled, and then it took time for water to come on into the earth, and then for the formation of life, mountains, etc. All these things take time. But yeah, the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. That's a scientific fact.
Yeah. That's
Okay, and you agree with that, Austin, or does that give you
yes,
qualm?
I do agree.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to ask about?
No, I just wanted to help settle that debate on religious people thinking that it was just the 7 days it was created, and then Earth is how it is today. So.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not.
Yep. That is, and it's it's particular to young Earth creationism, right? In Christianity, it's not just Christians. Muslims and other world religions believe it, but that's where that comes from, is just from the Book of Genesis, right? So. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, nice talking to you, Austin. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend.
You too.
All righty. And that was even shorter and even sweeter. Look at that. Just he just wanted a fact check on the age of the Earth, and he called up his boy, allegedly Ian, to confirm that for him. Yeah. Great. Cool. Short and sweet. I like it. Okay, let's get to another one here. We're going to talk to Daisy, who is calling in from Washington. Daisy, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Yo. Hey, what up, Ian?
Is the audio a bit cracked?
Well, go ahead. I think you're fixed now. I can hear you now. You were something was going crazy there with the electronics, but we're good now. Go ahead.
Okay. So my question, I'm an atheist, and also I'm a trans woman, and I know this is mainly a call-in show for the Christian people to call in, but I just wanted to ask about how there are some atheists that I used to really look up to, like Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins, and some of their opinions lately have gone so far right. Like in Sam Harris's case, like he's extremely supportive of harming people in the Middle East, and then Richard Dawkins just essentially is going along with J.K. Rowling, hating trans people and saying that they don't exist, even though, we're here. I just wanted to ask, is there a way that we can get atheist people, can atheists go too far in a wrong direction, where they're not having their same morality that can, when I listen to the show, all of you seem very morally based and all that kind of stuff. What is going on there?
I think you just gave some great examples of people going too far. I don't think you need to hear from us.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So one, this isn't just a show for Christians to call in. The title is vaguely ambiguous enough so that if you want to call in about aliens or conspiracies or whatever, this is the place to do that. So, don't think that you're not welcome here. You are. And this is a great topic to talk about because I've been in this space now for a few years and I've met some famous folks. And I've never met Sam Harris or Richard Dawkins actually, but I've met some influencers in the space, and I've met some folks that thought were one way, ended up being another. And it's really sad to see that. I can't tell you each individual person's psychology. What I can tell you is around the early 2010s, there was a general trend happening online in spaces of skepticism that was beyond just atheism, but almost sort of you can call it red pill, you can call it anti-feminist. There's a sort of a bubble of these ideas that were kind of bubbling up, and there's a lot of people smarter than me that have talked about this, and I think from that cultural trend that was happening, more and more people got influenced by these ideas. Turns out that rage baiting really works on the internet. Turns out when people are making content out there to get mad about, that brings in a lot of people. That's why notable places like libs of TikTok, right, are as popular as they are. And even mainstream politicians reference them because they're showing up in their feed because it's something for people to get mad at. So I think a lot of these influencer folks that people looked up to and were responsible for help changing their mind, I think they got caught up in that. And I think that, you know, because they're influencers, they're seeing people fire back at them, right? And they're getting mad at that. They're thinking, oh, these people are crazy. They're not reasonable. But hey, these sort of right-wing folks, they'll listen to me. They'll, you know, platform me. They'll get invited to all these spaces. And so I think that's partly why you see that shift, because they did become more open to folks that were quote unquote getting canceled for stuff, right? And so, you know, there really was a cultural moment that has happened and still continues to happen because of that. And a lot of atheist influencers were a part of that. They weren't the only folks, but they definitely were a part of that. And it's sad to see. I wish I could tell you that you know, it wasn't the case, but it is for sure.
Well, like with Richard Dawkins though specifically, like he's not really in the sort of like influencer space anymore. Like he used to be. And when I read his books originally, like I was an atheist from very young, like since I was 12, and like I read some of his books and they were very influential. And like someone with a mind like that is so like, I mean, he can be a bit of a grouch, but like, you know, it seems like someone who is just critically thinking like that, like, how do they get to this point where they're like, I mean, I never saw him as a bigot when I was younger, you know, and now he just seems like some of the things I've been hearing from him are just like I feel like, do you think it's his age, or is it just like, he's been corrupted somehow? Like what happened there?
Oh, I think that this is like obviously like incredibly multifaceted.
Yeah.
But there is something to be said. When you are the developer of like a theory, when you come up with like some idea, you're going to see it everywhere. You're going to try to put everything into the context of your theory. I think with Richard Dawkins, like the idea of I'm sure he probably applies the idea that like being trans is like some sort of like social meme where it's just like something that like spreads all around socially, which is like just like the incorrect interpretation of it. But like similar things happen. There's a philosopher that I really respected. His name's Giorgio Agamben. And he theorized this idea that the government will like utilize like crises to like grab power or whatever. It's called like the state of exception. Like they'll suspend the laws in order to defend its like sovereignty. And he became a COVID denier because he thought that the entire thing was a state of exception. He applied his theory wrongly to a situation where it just didn't apply. And I think that there's like something to be said about that a lot of theorists don't know when their like useful theorizing ends and where it's time for like another person to explain the phenomena because it's like clearly not related to what they think.
Yeah. Social media also. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Daisy, if you had something to say.
Oh, no, you go.
Well, I was just thinking while Ian was talking too, you know, what social media has also made, like, I now know Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris's opinions about things that I otherwise would not have known if it weren't for the internet, right? The internet has also forced us to become an expert on a million different topics. And if you look at all of my positions and you put it out on a document somewhere, I guarantee you're going to find some stuff that's probably wrong, right? That's just what it is to be a human being. And so I think we're seeing people's wrong stuff like in real time. And we're kind of also recoiling at, wow, how could this be as many people? I get us like, well, where are all these flat earthers coming from? Why is there a rise and stuff? And I think part of it's just because these people have kind of always been there. Anti-trans rhetoric's always been there, but like there's now a space you can go to talk to other people about that, which wasn't a thing before. I really think also too, when your entire career, okay, when you're like Sam Harris, is made from getting invited to speak at places, right? And to be able to have influence in space. And when you get rejected because of something you did, you're going to go to the places that accept you. And unfortunately, that tends to be the not so great places, right? The ones that do have that kind of anti-rhetoric. I think there was a time where people thought that liberals and left-leaning types were pro-censorship, were censoring all these great ideas. Why weren't they open to these other times of thinking? And really, it was just grifters. It was just grifters all the way down, you know, and it still continues to be that way. I think a lot of these thinkers just they can't objectively view themselves in the same way that you and I can't objectively view ourselves from up high there, you know. And we're just left to sit here and wonder. But it is sad.
Maybe it's
Go ahead, Daisy.
Well, maybe it's because Richard Dawkins went down this way because he's sort of part of the elite in England, and you know, like there's J.K. Rowling there, and she's on her whole anti-trans kick and all this kind of stuff, and like maybe it was because he was just in those circles that he wanted to fit in. And so like, that's why he decided, like, you know, I'm going to go.
Yeah, I tell you, I can't personally psychologize the man. What I can see is trends, material trends, and that being that right-wing spaces will take in a lot of people.
Yeah,
right?
True. Especially when they're fringe.
Right. And when somebody gets canceled for something, they'll be like, oh, hey, come on my podcast, come on my show. Let's talk about how these people canceled you for X, Y, or Z, right? And make you feel like you're a victim in the circumstance, even if you were the one that did something wrong, right? And a lot of these people have done things that weren't great.
Yeah.
So, a lot of stuff there, Daisy. I don't know what to tell you. I've thought about this a lot too.
I won't take up too much more of your time.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think what you both said was like super helpful. And like, I think like, thank you for explaining your point of views. And like, you know, the Austin Atheists, like that was part of my deconstruction when I was 12 years old, and now I'm 33. So like, you know, I really just like have so much love for this channel and this space. And so like, just keep doing what you're doing. And like, I really hope you have a great one, and keep fighting.
Thanks, Daisy. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's really awesome to hear. And thanks so much for your great topic. Like it's such an important thing to talk about. When I first got involved in activism in like 2017, and then Truth One started in like 2018, I think. I always get the years wrong on that. No, maybe it was 2017. I should know how long ago it was. Anyway, I was kind of coming in at a cultural moment too, and I knew I never wanted to be like the guys that were like I remember, you know, speaking up for trans people and talking about feminism and talking about these stuff that the atheist community was just kind of figuring out how to talk about. I feel like because a couple of years before, there were all kinds of channels of reacting to this feminist talking about, I don't know, some bullshit. I mean, like that really was kind of thing. And it gave atheism a really bad name. It's still a stink that people have to recover from, unfortunately.
Yeah. You know? Well, you know, I told you, so I was born in 01, and my I deconstructed, you know, I came away when I was like 14. So, you know, that was 2015. So I was watching like The Amazing Atheist. And then one day, all of a sudden, in my 14-year-old like For You page on YouTube, like the recommended,
right,
like suddenly there's just all this anti-feminist content.
Right.
So I consumed a lot of it, like a lot of it. And you know, I never went like super deep into it. Never became like some like right-wing incel or whatever. But there was like a period of time where I'd be like, I'm not a feminist. I support equality. You know, I'm an egalitarian.
Egalitarian, right?
Yeah,
that's the word.
Exactly.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't believe in equality. I believe in equality.
Right. It wasn't the norm. It really wasn't the norm to talk about these sort of socially progressive stuff in this space. And that's what turned people away from. I've personally tried to be very mindful of that in my own activist work and try to make sure that, hey, we're actually painting a good picture. That, hey, you don't have to be a bigot to be an atheist. I'm sorry, that sounds terrible. You shouldn't be a bigot to be an atheist. No, you don't have to be a bigot to be an atheist. That's terrible. That's
No, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
The point is, what's great about it's not just the skepticism, right? I think we put an emphasis on the skepticism. It's the openness. The openness is more important than the skepticism.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Like the idea, I don't know. I think that there is like the atheist mindset that you should feel like burning the idols, that whenever somebody tries to impose rules on you, you like make fun of them viciously. And I think that's a terrible mindset, right? Yeah. Like, you know, you should be thinking through each issue individually. Just rejection of everything is not enough. That's not a worldview. Saying no to everything, like you have to find like principles. You have to believe in things.
Right. Yeah. We pushed so many ideas away. We almost pushed away our kindness and our empathy and our, ability to be open with other people and to be open about when we're wrong as well. I think that's a really humbling thing. It's hard for anybody, but it's especially hard for a community that's supposedly prides itself on its independent thinking and its skepticism towards authority and towards these, these greater ideas. And so I think that's why it's also really hard for a lot of these figures to kind of figure that out as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, right? You brought this up at the very beginning of the show, Ian. When you're paid to do the thing that you're doing, it's hard to pivot, right? How do you pivot?
Right? Yeah. Why would you? Why would you ever even think about it? Why would you ever even reconsider it? When the food that's in your mouth depends on you believing the thing that you believe, why would your brain even think about it?
Yeah, and guess what? All those anti-trans folks, they're eating good. They have an audience.
Yeah.
Right. And they have people that will tell them they're right every day of the week. It's hard to combat. So yeah, I hope I never become one of those kinds of people personally.
Yeah. That's why it's good. I don't know. There's a lot of friends that I have that I'm really grateful that I have, because they're people who like genuinely think very critically. When I'm coming up with like a new argument for atheism, a new argument against like certain things in the God debate, I have really good friends who will listen to those and then they'll argue with me like they were a theist. They'll say, well, the theist probably wants to say like one of these 5 things, and then they'll go through like the 5 responses that they can think of. And that's phenomenal, right? Like you should be thinking like, is what I believe true? You should constantly be reevaluating it. That's how you avoid cognitive inertia. That's how you avoid getting like audience captured, or I mean audience captured for us, right? But for individuals just like stuck in like a worldview where you like just believe it for basically no reason. You just got to reevaluate it always, constantly. If it's true, then it can survive the reevaluation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's so true, but it's hard to live up to those principles apparently, and never meet your heroes. I don't know. The folks I'm grateful for the folks I've been able to meet personally, but yeah, I can't tell you about folks like Dawkins and stuff. They're above my pay grade. I will say, they are just as susceptible to material trends and the material reality we live in just as much as we are. And to me, that's the biggest facet, and what's a multifaceted problem is people respond to that stuff, and they respond to it like really well, actually, and they'll get platformed, and they'll get views, and they'll get everything from it. So as long as there's incentive there's going to be a motive, right? So anyway, on that note, we are getting towards the end of our program. Ian, I want to thank you so much for being on today's episode of Truth Wanted. I thought it was fantastic. What'd you think?
Me too. I had a wonderful time. I thought it was so much fun.
Great. Folks at home, we're not doing an after show today. I know I got a couple callers still in the queue. I'm so sorry. We are no-go on the after show today. But if people want to find more of your content, Ian, where should they go?
Yeah, my YouTube channel is allegedly Ian. My TikTok is allegedly.Ian. Both of those have a link tree. Those have all my links. I have a Discord server. It's 18 plus. But if you like talks about religion, philosophy, really anything you want, join the Discord. It's a great place. I love it there.
Heck yeah. And on that note, I need to thank everybody that helped make the show happen today. And I want to thank, of course, as always, the crew. And I want to bring Eli back and say thank you to Eli for being our backup today. Thanks so much, Eli.
You're welcome. It was a great show. Thanks for, letting me hang out backstage.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Of course. And Eli, what was the prompt again for this week?
For this week's prompt, what are some conspiracy theories that you think could arise in the future?
Sweet. So leave your comment below in YouTube, and we will read our favorite 3 answers next week. Last but not least here, Ian, I always ask my guests for some words of wisdom before we leave the show. You got any words of wisdom for us today?
They're stolen, but they're very wise words. The unexamined life is not worth living.
Socrates. Classic. Yes. Classic. And on that note, folks, I'm Objectively Dan. This has been another great episode of Truth Wanted. Remember to always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.
Watch The Non-Prophets and join the hosts in the live chat. Visit tiny.cc/ytnp.